In 1864, 23 children were discovered hidden in the basement of a plantation in Georgia. Union soldiers forced open the iron doors of the Thornhill estate in Burke County and found the children huddled in the darkness. They weren't just connected by blood. They all shared the same striking features: pale green eyes, high cheekbones, and hair that looked like it was threaded with gold. Some were only 4 years old. Others were nearly teenagers. The oldest was a 13-year-old girl who reportedly said something that made even veteran soldiers feel sick. And yet, what happened next is where the story gets even more disturbing. According to an account recorded by the 34th Massachusetts Infantry, once in a letter marked confidential, this wasn't an ordinary tragedy. It was something planned, something systematic, something meant to last. Local records and local histories quietly avoided the Thornhill name entirely, as if the plantation, and the woman who ran it, never existed at all. But she did. And between the death of her husband and the arrival of federal troops, Catherine Thornhill allegedly built what may be one of the most horrifying chapters in American history. It began long before the children were found. In February 1847, Catherine Danforth Thornhill inherited a struggling plantation after her husband Jonathan died. The estate sat on 1,700 acres in Burke County, on red clay soil that had been worn down by years of exhausting cotton production. Jonathan had left behind debt, bad management, and creditors circling. Catherine was 28, trapped between two options her lawyer presented: sell everything and return to her father's house, or try to save a plantation that was already failing. But she didn't see saving the land as the problem. She saw people as the solution. The story claims she created a breeding plan designed to produce generations of enslaved children who would be genetically bound to the estate, so they couldn't be sold away, because in a twisted way, they would belong to her bloodline. She allegedly kept coded cultivation records, using substitution cipher and diagrams meant to look like farm charts. In her notebooks, children were treated like seedlings, men selected as rootstock, and pregnancies treated like plantings. And to make it work, she didn't rely on chance. She relied on control. The first man chosen was Isaac, described as physically strong. Within weeks, Catherine believed she was pregnant. But her household didn't stay quiet. Her stepson, Richard, 16 years old, became suspicious when things didn't add up. He reportedly overheard conversations, matched timelines, and eventually cracked the code in the journal. When he confronted her, the story says his health began to fail: weakness, headaches, exhaustion, symptoms that matched poisoning. His death was recorded as illness. And only days later, Catherine gave birth, claiming everything was normal. From then on, the pattern allegedly expanded. Children were born, raised inside the main house, and prepared for the next stages of her plan. A local midwife, Miriam Grayson, was said to play a role not only in deliveries, but in keeping the births on schedule, including preventing pregnancies that didn't fit Catherine's system. By the time the Civil War was nearing its end, the Thornhill estate wasn't just a plantation. It was a living experiment built to continue long after its inventor was gone. Then resistance began. One of Catherine's children, later described as a daughter named Eleanor, reportedly uncovered one of the journals and learned the truth. Once the children understood what was being done to them, the atmosphere inside the house changed. They didn't just feel trapped. They felt exposed to the full purpose behind their lives. And fear started to replace control on Catherine's side. The story says Catherine tried to reassert dominance through public punishment, making an example of someone who had tried to escape. But the cruelty didn't break them. It clarified their power. In 1864, as Union forces closed in, Catherine allegedly gathered her remaining children and tried to convince them that if the Yankees came, they'd lose everything, branding them as outcasts. But her children reportedly rejected her. And in the final scramble for control, Catherine reportedly ran toward the quarters with her journals and evidence, while the enslaved community turned on the moment they had been waiting for. After that night, Catherine disappeared. Her journals were found torn and scattered, and her body was never recovered. The next morning, she was listed as missing, supposedly having fled with the advancing Union Army. But everyone involved knew it wasn't that simple. Decades later, the estate's past finally surfaced in a way no one could hide. In 1871, a well driller digging on the property reportedly discovered a skeleton in an underground system, buried far below, dressed in the style of the 1860s, in a way that suggested a deliberate attempt to erase her. And years that followed were filled with rumors, family whispers, and incomplete answers. But most people eventually knew about the 23 children, freed and placed with families whose lives were shaped by what Catherine created, and by what others chose to do when the war shifted.